Conversations That Matter is a partner program of the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you. Welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
You know, more and more people are paying attention to what they eat, and they're looking at it from the perspective of diet. They're going, is this good for me? Is that not good for me? Will I put on weight? Will I lose weight?
Yeah.
But they seem to do it in an environment or in a belief that what they're eating is safe. Are they safe? For the most part, are they not safe? From your perspective, where are we at around food safety?
I think most people don't actually realize how unsafe we actually are.
Unsafe.
Unsafe, yeah. In BC this year, for example, there's going to be 550,000 cases of foodborne illness. Works out to about 1 out of every 8 individuals.
You're talking about food poisoning.
Yeah, food poisoning of various types. All the way from some sort of minor thing that blows over after a day or two, all the way to much more serious illnesses, even death.
So why is it that we're under the belief that our food is safe, and yet there's so many people who are going to experience a food-related illness?
I think we assume that because we buy most of our food from retailers, we assume that the situation is under control and that the retailers, have inspectors and make sure that the companies that supply them food have food safety programs in place that are effective. Yeah.
So as a consumer, I'm kind of on faith buying my food, believing that somebody else has checked it.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is you can go to the grocery store, you can pick up a product off the shelf, you can see if it's gluten-free, non-GMO, organic, but there's actually nothing that tells you on the product whether or not the product is manufactured by a company that takes food safety seriously. And here in BC, we have the Ministry of Health told me that there's about 5,500 food processors. Now that's everybody up from large manufacturers to small mom and pop operations. 4,900 are inadequate in terms of their food safety programs.
4,900 out of 5,500 are inadequate.
Yes, and many have none.
So why are we operating in an environment like this?
Well, I mean, I think the government's been asking the same question. So both federally and provincially, there's new regulations in Canada and also in the United States and in other countries. In Canada, we have the Safe Food for Canadians Act that actually came into force in 2011. And so far, there's no new regulations that are enforced to uphold that legislation, which was designed to rectify that problem and require that all food producers have a food safety program in place.
But I'm under the impression that they're out there checking, because we hear every now and then they had to eliminate an entire population of birds, or other species or farms have seen their stock destroyed because it was discovered that there was some pathogen that would be harmful to human beings. And so that gives me the sense that people are ever vigilant and on the watch.
Well, there's different agencies involved, right? So in Canada, we have the Health Canada that sets the regulations. We have the Canadian Food Inspection Agency that does the federal inspections. We have the ministries of health that in some provinces inspect smaller provincial operations. And then we have the Ministries of Agriculture, both Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada on the federal level, and the BC Ministry of Agriculture here in BC. And the agriculture departments are actually quite proactive. Mm. So when you're talking about flocks destroyed in BC or in Ontario because of the avian flu, or in Alberta with the one incidence that they had of mad cow disease, mm-hmm. that they're totally on the ball. Yeah, but the other agencies are not quite as proactive. And the problem is that there's an enormous gap between where the companies are today and where they need to be before the regulations can be enforced. And if they're enforced too soon, we'll just compromise our food supply.
So how do we get from where we are today to where we need to be, so that there really is safety in food the way we think it's there right now?
Well, I'm not extremely hopeful from the government side.
That's not the message I wanted to hear. When you say, here's the step-by-step and we're going to wind up there.
Most of the changes, the positive change that is taking place on the ground now is driven by retailers. So, food manufacturers are focused on producing food, not really ensuring food safety. they're when they put product out the door, they're actually amazingly optimistic that they're not going to have any kind of recalls, and they don't really worry about that until it happens, even though these can be business-killing events when they do take place.
Human-killing events as well. When we take a look at the horrible peanut scandal in the United States going back 7 or 8 years ago, it's atrocious.
That was really a watershed case with Stuart Parnell getting 28 years in prison for his actions or misdeeds, actually, in terms of the peanut case. That was an egregious example because there they had results coming back from the lab. It showed that the food was contaminated with salmonella, and there's evidence that he actually told people, hey, let's ignore that and we're going to ship product anyway.
Yeah, willfully ignored it, denied it, and shipped the product, and people died.
Yes, and the FDA, I actually spoke to one of the officials from the FDA last week in the United States, and they were telling me that is kind of the mode that they're going to moving forward. They're going to pursue aggressive criminal charges against anybody that fails to comply to the new Food Safety Modernization Act regulations that have also been enacted in the United States, but they've been allowed to slip. But now there's court-mandated deadlines so they're no longer allowed to slip, and that's.
But if we take a look in British Columbia, you say there's 5,500 food manufacturers here. 4,900 of them aren't where they need to be. Then you look at the scale in the United States. How are they going to be able to do it? How are they going to be able to stay on top of that?
We're trying different approaches in the different countries. First of all, both regulatory authorities have allowed the deadlines to slip to give food manufacturers more time. There's some that do take advantage of that additional runway, but the majority will procrastinate to the last second, so it really hasn't had the desired effect. In Canada, what we're doing is they're bringing in a series of what they call AMPs, which are administrative monetary penalties, which is like escalating fines, kind of like traffic tickets. So if the inspector sees something they don't like, they'll give you a little fine, and if you don't correct the problem, the fine will escalate.
So if they nudge, they push, then they shove.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Completely different situation in the U.S. though. They're not bringing that in. They're just going to set examples of, a few individuals and hoping that that'll bring all the rest into line.
That'll be enough to get others in line.
Yeah, and the Stuart Parnell case is the first of those.
I got to get you to hang on for just a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program. Thank you. So for you, you're trying to do something about that.
Yes.
What is it that you're trying to do?
So what we do is we've developed software solutions where we can deploy a generic model of various different types of businesses, whether it be a bakery or a dairy or anything else, and then minimum amount of adjustment has to happen to tailor the deployment to that specific organization, which reduces the time that's required to develop a food safety program by at least 75%, sometimes 90%.
Okay, explain to me, because on the surface I think, okay, well, how does a software program provide food safety? What are the components of that program that can give me as the consumer some sense that this food is going to be okay for me to eat?
Well, the first issue is that you have to identify actually the hazards. So what we do with our solution is you model, or the food manufacturer would model the processes, the ingredients, the materials, the packaging that they use. And then for each of those elements, the hazards can be identified, whether they be biological, chemical, or physical. And then there's a workflow that'll take you through the process of determining how the hazards are controlled. And so the first step is identification, and the second step is control. The identification step by itself, I mean, I meet food manufacturers every day, and many times I go in and I say, okay, well, what hazards do you have to address? And the really common response is, what's a hazard?
Huh?
So, yeah, so they're not even...
That must be a little unsettling.
It's very unsettling, yeah. And
So just a little sidebar here. Where are you at when you go and buy food yourself? How do you go through the process of trying to determine whether or not what you're about to pick off the shelf or order in the restaurant is going to be safe for you to consume?
Well, let me be clear. I mean, you would have to starve to death if you don't take risks, right? So
True.
I do take risks, but generally speaking, it's made a big change for myself and my family in terms of the food products that we purchase and the choices that we make.
So tell me what you do. In the absence of us being where we need to be, where there is complete safety, how do you ensure your own safety right now?
Well, first of all, I look at the products that are the highest on the danger list and try to avoid those. So
Which are?
Which, like for example, in the top 10, the most dangerous product that you can possibly buy according to the FDA today is organic baby spinach. So
Organic baby spinach.
yeah.
By virtue of the name, you'd think, oh, this is safe.
Well, people purchase,
Organic.
they seek organic out.
Yeah.
And organic, actually, let me be clear, the organic farm processes, if you follow the best practices, are very safe. Because it doesn't mean that you can't wash things and you can't use pesticides. It just means that they have to be derived from a natural source. But there is a fairly broad controls that you can use if it is organic. The problem is that a lot of manufacturers take it a little bit too far, so that they may use just a gentle wash with water instead of using some sort of antibacterial soap, for example, which is why a lot of these products do come out and they're more dangerous. Another
So
thing.
are you saying don't buy organic baby spinach, or be careful who you're getting it from and do a little research?
I think that doing research is probably the way. I don't want to upset everybody, the organic
Oh yeah, I
industry.
know. They're going to be phoning you and saying, what?
Yeah, exactly. But you do have to be careful, no question. And the general rule of thumb is the larger the retailer, the safer it is. Which is
Okay, so it's most likely that they will have done the research to confirm that producer is meeting the highest possible standards.
Yeah.
But what if you're unsure? Can you go to the producer of that product and ask them for information?
You can certainly do that.
It's a lot of work.
I would start with the retailer, and I would find out kind of what their system is. So if you speak to the retailer where you're going shopping and you ask them, okay, what does your food safety program look like, and how do you verify that your suppliers provide safe food? That's a great place to start. Do you send out inspectors? Great question to ask.
So what led you to want to now go out and say, okay, I think that this is something that needs to be addressed? What happened with you that made you say, I want to take this on?
Yeah, I had personally 3 very significant bouts of foodborne illness. I think it was a life-threatening situation. Laid in a hotel room for 3 days, too sick to tell anybody I was dying, and finally realized I wasn't going to make it if nobody knew. So I was conscious about foodborne illness from that point. So I was, I'm sensitive to that. And then I'm a technology person in software myself, and I was doing work for all different sorts of manufacturers across the country, some of whom happen to be food manufacturers. And I asked them, one day I was driving to visit one, and there was the XL meat scandal came out, or recalls came out on the news. And when I arrived at my client's location, I asked them, how do you mitigate this risk? And I noticed they did have a food safety plan, but it was entirely manually based. Very labor intensive. It tends to get out of control very quickly. It's generally stale. They kind of do it, put it on the shelf, and don't pull it out until the time the next inspection occurs. So I wanted to have I give them a technology solution that would allow them to use the software on a daily basis to make sure that the food safety wasn't only prepared for the inspection.
I wish that we could just keep going right the way through, but I got to get you to hang on for just a second longer while we take another break. Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program. Thank you. So how does your software help keep them on the path to food safety on a daily basis?
Well, it provides the kind of infrastructure that's needed to do things like inspections, connect up with logging so that you can control temperature and water activity and the various parameters that you need to make sure that the food processes are safe. There's a notification infrastructure so that people can be notified if things don't happen. And one of the big surprises to me was that many of our clients who do have pretty comprehensive food safety plans in place, they asked me, would you mind if we grant access to our inspectors? And I always thought, it's kind of like giving it to the CRA auditor. You usually don't want them to see directly into your bank account. But the way they look at it is that a lot of companies who do make significant investments in food safety, they want to capitalize on that. And part of that is to grant access to either customers in terms of the retailers they sell to, or inspectors. So a lot of them are doing that, both.
Because it helps to solidify their reputation as being a reputable producer.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons that they do that. One is that it does build trust with the auditor and good relations, which they feel is important. And secondly, it keeps the auditor out of their place. So the auditor can sit at home with their feet on the coffee table and do the documentation review, and they only need to come in for the physical part of the inspection. So it kind of works out for everybody.
So when did you start?
End of 2011 was when we first kind of opened the can of worms, so to speak.
So you're 4 years into this. How's it being accepted?
One of the things I've discovered is that you can't go out proactively to food manufacturers and say, hey, we have a solution for you. How about you consider implementing it? Because there's really very little interest to that. Where we do get it is with companies who've received calls from their retailers, who are the biggest drivers in making a difference in food safety. So, people like Costco, for example, who will, call their suppliers up and say, okay, we've been buying from you for a long time. If you want to maintain the relationship with us, you're going to have a food safety plan in place by X date. And then people are looking for a solution. They have no other choice if they want to keep the customers, so they call us up. And at that point, when they're actively looking for a solution, then it's, we can really give them the kind of silver bullet solution they need to meet those requirements.
Now, this is software that sort of monitors all the different processes, but it's not actually inspecting the food, is it?
No, it's not. No.
So that's another part of the process.
Well, there's the whole issue of food fraud, for example. The big case happened in the UK with horse meat that was supposed to be ground beef, for example, or in China when melamine killed 800 children in the baby food. So our software puts in place procedures and inspections that can allow you to kind of check and control for those things, or plan how you're going to control for those things. Yeah, but we don't have eyeballs in the sky that's watching everything everybody's doing.
So how important are those procedures? I can have scanners, infrared scanners, I can have people who are doing these things, but if there isn't a process that this is happening on a regular basis and the results are being monitored, does that matter? And I guess this comes back to your approach, which is to say, we're helping you stay on top of things.
Yeah, I think that we can't help fraud directly, like with things, for example, like there was a case with cattle in California recently where there were cattle that were being slaughtered and a herd came in and they had facial cancer. So the USDA inspector rejected those animals, and when he left to go for lunch, they replaced the diseased animals back on the production line. So that kind of thing, you could if you wanted to engage in that type of activity, you need other ways to check it. But what we can do is we can provide sort of a two-step process where, first of all, the checks can be scheduled in advance, and if it doesn't happen, people can be notified, and secondly, they can be verified.
This is our final break. Right after that, we'll come back and sort of wrap it up around what we can do as individuals to ensure that we have better food safety. We'll be right back. Conversations That Matter is a not-for-profit program made possible thanks to the charitable support of the following and from viewers like you. Please visit conversationsthatmatter.tv and help us to continue to produce this program. Thank you. So as a consumer, you say that my best bet is to go back to my retailer and let them know that I'm paying attention, ask them what their policies are, and have them monitor their suppliers.
That's exactly true. They should be monitoring their suppliers, and if they're not, there's a major problem. And they're not all monitoring their suppliers, so there is a major problem, I can tell you. One of the major retailers that I spoke to, for example, told me that they have 10,000 suppliers, and they have a reasonable level of confidence in the food safety of 8,000 of them.
Reasonable level
Yeah.
in 8,000. Does that mean that the other 2,000 they have a high level of?
Uncertainty about, yeah, that's exactly the problem. So.
Oh, not a high level of assurance, but a high level of uncertainty.
Yeah, and they have enough monitoring and inspection in place to know that. The ones that are really scary are the ones that don't even know.
But they're still selling products that they're uncertain about.
Yes, I think that's the case in general.
So it comes back to me as the consumer. And your number one tip for the consumer to protect themselves is, if the retailer can only go so far, what's the number one most important thing that I can do to protect myself when it comes to my own food safety?
Well, I mean, there's things that, first of all, the risk profile of contracting a foodborne illness increases from what they say from farm to fork. So the most foodborne illnesses actually occur by people in the home who may not pay attention. They use their nose instead of the expiry date, for example, to determine whether or not the food's contaminated, that kind of thing. So first thing you can do is pay attention to what you're doing in your own practices.
So we have responsibility in this too.
Yeah, treat chicken like it's radioactive, actually, for example, because chicken is one product that's allowed to be sold, to be shipped contaminated. E. coli, salmonella are very common.
Based on the idea that you are going to cook that out of there.
You've got to cook it out of there. You've got to check the temperature of your, of your meat when you're cooking it. Make sure that it's, at a reasonable temperature. Hamburger, for example, you don't want to eat raw hamburger. So that's the first thing that you can do. Second thing is, you can tailor what you're eating and be careful about it. Bean sprouts, for example, are quite a dangerous product. Many people have died from eating contaminated bean sprouts. There was a big outbreak in Europe a few years ago.
I'm disappointed to hear that because I like bean sprouts.
So they're great. So you can use a mild wash, which will make sure that product is safe.
So wash your food. Handle it properly.
If you're sitting at a Vietnamese restaurant, put it in the soup. Don't eat it raw on the side. Because heat is one of the best ways to control contaminants. Beyond that, you can try to find out whether or not the retailer does have inspections and is monitoring the processor, and the processor itself. You can call up and ask, tell me about your food safety program. What do you do to make sure that the products that I eat from you are safe?
Mm-hmm. So don't blindly trust, and also take some responsibility yourself, but put pressure back on the supply chain to ensure that they're doing it properly.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll find that large companies, by and large, do have food safety programs in place. There's a lot of great small producers that really step up to the plate and make sure that their products are safe too. But unfortunately, it's not universally the case. Co-packers are another problem because a lot of companies don't make their own products. So you got to make sure that, really, it's the manufacturer should make sure that if they're using a co-packing service, that co-packer has food safety programs in place.
Well, let's hope that enough of us start to raise our voices about that and say, what I put in my mouth really matters to me, and you have a responsibility to make sure that it's safe. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in and doing this.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.